I stood in the doorway of my grandmother's house, feeling the weight of its history pressing down on me. It had been abandoned for years, a silent sentinel watching over the sleepy little town of Willow Creek. My grandmother, Agnes, had passed away a year ago, leaving the house to me, her only grandchild. I'd been a city girl my entire life, my world a whirlwind of concrete and glass, the constant hum of traffic my lullaby. But now, I was standing in the doorway of a house that held both the memories of my childhood and the secrets of a woman I barely knew. Agnes had been a woman of quiet strength, her heart filled with a love that transcended all explanation. She was the kind of person who lived for their family, their love a constant source of comfort and warmth. But there was a shadow to her, a sadness that lingered in her eyes, a hint of fear that she always tried to hide. I remembered the stories my mother told me. Agnes, a young woman filled with dreams and aspirations, had fled the city to the solace of Willow Creek, seeking a life away from the relentless rhythm of urban life. She had found love with my grandfather, a kind and gentle man who shared her love for the simple pleasures of life. They built their home, a haven from the world, filled with the laughter of their young family. Then, the tragedy struck. My grandfather, a man of the sea, perished in a storm, leaving Agnes a widow, her heart shattered and her world turned upside down. She never remarried, dedicating her life to her children and her grandchildren. But she never recovered from the loss. I'd always sensed a deep sadness in her, a yearning for something lost. But it was the fear, the unspoken dread, that always baffled me. It manifested in her avoidance of the basement, the forbidden room that held a secret she refused to reveal. "The basement is off limits," she would say, her voice tight with a fear that chilled me to the bone. "It's not safe." I never understood her fear. The basement was nothing more than a dark and dusty space, filled with forgotten trinkets and the scent of damp earth. But Agnes's fear was palpable, her voice trembling as she spoke, her eyes filled with a terror that burrowed deep into my bones. As I stepped into the house, the silence was deafening. The air hung thick with the smell of dust and mildew, the furniture draped in white sheets, their outlines hinting at the lives once lived within these walls. I walked through the house, each room a tableau of forgotten memories. There was the living room, its worn couch holding the ghosts of countless evenings spent reading and talking, the fireplace a silent witness to the warmth and laughter that once filled the room. The kitchen, with its worn countertop and chipped dishes, spoke of meals cooked with love, the aroma of fresh bread and simmering stews filling the air. The bedrooms, each with a unique personality, held the dreams and aspirations of a family once complete. The air grew colder as I made my way to the basement door. A chill ran down my spine, and my breath caught in my throat. I hesitated, the fear I'd always felt in Agnes's presence now a palpable entity, a shadow that danced around my ankles. Taking a deep breath, I reached out and turned the rusted handle. The door creaked open, groaning in protest, revealing a dark and cavernous space. The air was thick and heavy, the scent of damp earth and mildew assaulting my nostrils. The only light came from a single, flickering bulb, casting long, jagged shadows on the rough concrete walls. Hesitantly, I stepped inside, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. The darkness seemed to press in on me, suffocating my senses. I could hear the faint sound of dripping water, a constant reminder of the passage of time and the relentless cycle of decay. I walked deeper into the basement, the darkness a suffocating blanket around me, the flickering bulb casting grotesque shadows that danced on the walls. Objects lay scattered around the room, covered in dust and cobwebs, their origin shrouded in mystery. There was a tattered armchair, its cushions ripped and torn, its upholstery faded to a sickly yellow. A wooden rocking horse, its paint chipped and faded, its mane tangled and matted, lay abandoned in a corner, its once bright paint now a dull and lifeless gray. A pile of old books, their pages brittle and yellowed, lay stacked near the wall, their covers worn and faded, their secrets buried beneath layers of dust and time. I reached out and picked up one of the books, its leather cover stiff and cracked, its pages yellowed and brittle. I opened it, the pages rustling with age, their ink faded and smudged. It was a journal, filled with Agnes's neat, precise handwriting. I began to read, the words a window into her soul, revealing the depth of her pain and the secrets she had kept hidden for so long. The journal chronicled the events that had led to her fear, the events that had haunted her for decades. The story began with a seemingly ordinary summer day, a day filled with the laughter of children and the promise of a bright future. Agnes, a young woman full of life, had been tending her garden, the scent of roses and lilies filling the air. Suddenly, a tremor shook the ground beneath her feet. The tremor was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to make her uneasy. As the days turned into weeks, the tremors became more frequent, more intense, until the ground beneath her feet was a constantly shifting, unstable surface. Then, the earthquakes began. The first one was small, a gentle shake that rattled the windows and made the dishes clink in the cupboard. But with each passing earthquake, the tremors grew stronger, the ground beneath their feet a chaotic ballet of destruction. Agnes wrote of her fear, of the constant dread that hung over them, of the terror that gripped their hearts as the earth trembled beneath their feet. She wrote of the nights spent huddled together in the living room, their faces pale with fear, their eyes wide with terror, the sound of the quakes a constant, haunting melody. But it wasn't the earthquakes that filled her with the most dread, it wasn't the fear of the earth giving way beneath their feet. It was the fear of something else, something that lurked in the depths of the earth, something that stirred with every tremor, something that watched them from the shadows. She wrote of the strange sounds they had begun to hear, the low, guttural growls that resonated through the earth, a sound that sent shivers down their spines and filled them with an icy terror. She wrote of the strange creatures she had seen, their bodies gnarled and twisted, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They appeared at night, their forms flickering in and out of the shadows, their presence a chilling reminder of the terror that had gripped their hearts. One night, a particularly violent earthquake shook the house, sending tremors that rattled the walls and made the ceilings groan in protest. The ground beneath their feet seemed to writhe and twist, the air thick with the smell of dust and fear. Agnes wrote of the terror that had gripped her heart, of the fear that had consumed her, of the feeling that something evil was lurking beneath them, something that desired to breach the thin barrier of earth that separated them from the depths of hell. She wrote of her husband's decision to investigate the source of the tremors, to find out what was happening beneath their feet. She wrote of his determination, of his love for his family, of his desire to protect them, even at the cost of his own life. She wrote of his descent into the basement, of how he had disappeared into the darkness, never to return. The last entry in the journal was a single sentence, written in a trembling hand. "I will never go down there again." I closed the journal, my fingers trembling, my mind reeling from the horror of her story. I stood in the darkness, the air thick with the weight of her pain, the silence a deafening echo of her fear. I walked around the basement, my hand brushing against the cold, damp concrete walls. I looked up at the rusted pipes hanging from the ceiling, the flickering bulb casting grotesque shadows on the rough concrete. I felt something moving in the darkness, a faint rustling sound, a whisper of something unseen. I turned, my heart pounding in my chest, my eyes searching the shadows for any sign of movement. The basement was empty, the shadows the only inhabitants of the dark space. But the feeling of being watched, of being observed, remained. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, my mind struggling to process the story I had just read. The fear I'd always felt in Agnes's presence, the unspoken dread, was now a tangible entity, a shadow that clung to me, a whisper that echoed in my ears. I knew I had to leave, to get away from this place, this house, this unbearable weight of fear. But something held me there, a sense of duty, a need to understand, to find out what had happened to my grandfather. I walked back to my grandmother's journal, picking it up, its worn leather cover cold against my fingers. The words on the page seemed to glow, their ink vivid and clear, their story etched in my mind. I knew I had to go back, to find out what had happened to my grandfather, to face the fear that had haunted my grandmother for so long. But first I needed to tell my mother, to share the secret that Agnes had kept hidden for so many years. As I left the house, the silence of the night felt heavy and oppressive, the air filled with the scent of dust and mildew, the weight of my grandmother's fear pressing down on me. I knew I was heading into the unknown, into the heart of my grandmother's fear, but I also knew I couldn't stay away. The story of my grandmother's fear was just beginning, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the truth was waiting in the darkness, hidden in the depths of the earth, waiting to be discovered.